Hello, everyone. My name is Yijun Zhao from Fordham University. It's my pleasure here to talk about machine learning, a topic in machine learning here to everyone. It's part of my research. The title for today's talk is Addressing Bias and Subjectivity in Machine Learning. For machine learning, it's really finding patterns in data, so to put it in a one-sentence summary. So a fundamental assumption in supervised machine learning algorithm is that the data is coming from the same distribution. So the learning process is really discovering this distribution, and so that we can make future predictions when there's new data coming in. So but there is a common predicament when we apply machine learning to real-world applications. That is, the data actually collected from multiple sources. They are not coming from the same distribution. And so this problem can come into two kinds of problems. One is called bias. For example, when patients have their preference for their own doctors, right? Like there's a study actually showing male patients, they prefer male doctors, and the female patients prefer female doctors. And also there's a range, like a doctor between 50 and 60 are the most chosen ones compared with out of the other range band. So this is like a patient bias. And there's also another example would be the email. When we try to distinguish if the email is a spam or non-spam, it depends the user group. So then there's a different distribution of email is a spam or not spam among different user groups. Okay, so we call this bias. And the subjectivity is when there's a human opinions involved. For example, the doctor rating on patients' test results. We're not talking about hard measures like blood pressure, like glucose level, rather than like a cognitive test results. So one doctor may give this patient's rating 5, and another may give a rating 3, right? So data collected from multiple doctors is not going to form the same distribution. So when we apply a machine learning algorithm, try to discover what kind of distribution the data has so that we can make future predictions, and then we usually don't achieve satisfactory results. Okay, so this is the problem that my research is trying to address, is to a collection of methods to enhance performance while we're learning with data with this kind of bias and subjectivity involved. And I'm going to illustrate the models that we have developed using 3 real-world applications. And hopefully, if I may not be able to cover all these, at least I'll be able to cover the first 2 of them. So the first one is to predict disease course for multiple sclerosis patients. Okay, so this is multiple sclerosis is a progressive disease, a neurological disorder. So we're trying to predict if the patient is going to be highly progressive or not highly progressive 5 years down the road with the observation of their only first 2 years observation. So here, the data has the patient bias and the physician subjectivity that I have mentioned before in the previous slides. And the second one is to detect abnormal cortical regions for epileptic patients. So this is in collaboration with NYU's medical school. And we take patients' 3D MRI scans and try to find the lesional areas for epileptic patients. And here, the bias is really everybody's brain is different because our educational background, some people are left-handed, some people are right-handed. So the brain structure is not the same for everyone. So this is the bias we're trying to address. And the third application that I work on is try to predict potential performance of applicants for a MS program. So you get a pool of candidates. Who do you admit? Can you predict if a person is going to be successful in the program? So here, the subjectivity is really from year to year, you have different admission officers. So when they read the people's admission material, they may think differently. Some officers may put emphasis on the SAT score, and some officers may put emphasis on the GPAs that the student has. So these are the subjectivity in the data that we try to address. So we're going to have 3 models built that's for each of these applications. So let's start with the first one, which is predicting the disease course for multiple sclerosis. And we built a model called domain-induced Dirichlet mixture of Gaussian processes. So let me first give a brief introduction of what multiple sclerosis is. It's an autoimmune system disease that our central nerve system, it's an autoimmune disease of our central nerve system in which the immune system will attack the protective layer of our nerve, which is called the myelin sheath. And then it will eat it away, actually. And then the body will try to heal it, and then the immune system will attack it again. So after a few times, there will be scars along your nerves, this protective layer. So as a result, the signal is not going to transmit smoothly from your brain to along this nerve system. And what happens is patients are going to suffer various levels of disabilities. And some patients may just lose vision, and it may recover after a certain time. And some patients may fall just unexpectedly. So this level of disability is measured by a comprehensive score called EDSS. It's Expanded Disease Status Scale. It's from 1 to 10. So this EDSS is derived from 7 neurological functional tests that the doctors perform on the patients. And these test ratings are highly subjective, what the doctor rate the patients. And as a result, this EDSS score is also highly subjective. Okay? So now there's also another feature of multiple sclerosis, this characteristic, is that if the patients going into a high range of disability, that is, if the EDSS score is greater than 2, then they will have very little chance to revert back. The higher the score, the more severe the disability is. So the goal is, it is critical that we predict the disease at this early stage to know that the patient is going to progress into a high EDSS range, so that we prevent that, treat them early enough so it doesn't happen. Okay? So our goal is to predict a patient's EDSS score at the 5-year mark using the first 2 years clinical observations, so at the beginning stage of their disease. So our solution is, because the data is coming from different distributions, they are collected from different hospitals and doctors. Actually, for this case, it's only different doctors. It's from the same hospital. So our solution is try to model the data as a mixture of subgroups. Okay, so the data is going to be intrinsically divided, sort of forming subgroups. And with the same group, each component would represent data with similar bias characteristics. So that is our solution. So now the question comes, how many groups? Because we don't know how many type of bias or subjectivity is in the data. So in this case, we deployed a technique called the Dirichlet process, which is something that the data, it's a non-parametric clustering technique that the groups are formed by the data, characteristic of the data. So I wouldn't go into detail of this process because it's gonna, for the time concern. So just for now to know, this kind of a process can group the data according to data characteristics. It's more like letting the data tell us how many groups that you have, the data has. And then the predictive process is using a Gaussian process, which is a regression model. So this is our main predictive model, but also there is a domain knowledge involved from the doctors, because from the doctors they are telling us that if there's those patients that are between, started with very benign case, the EDS is less than 2, or the between 2 and 4 or greater than 4, their progression is different. You know, the speed of their progression could be different. They give us this kind of a rough division of the subgroups of patients. So what do we do with this doctor's knowledge? So one way is to apply our model into each subgroup of patients, right? Because the doctor is telling us there's a grouping of patients like that. And this would be good if the doctors are 100% correct. The truth is that sometimes patients at the borderline, it's not that accurate. So we can do better by using a k-means algorithm. That's another clustering algorithm. Try to group these patients according to what the doctor, according to doctor's opinion, but hopefully we're getting it more accurate. So we will compare our model, which with k-means and our predictive model working together, with that applying our model individually to each subgroup. And we'll see that our model is actually going to do a better job in this sense. So on a high level, this is what we did. So there are two clustering going on right now. The top level clustering is doctor's opinion, the k-means. Okay, so saying the patients are grouped into some kind of sub-disease groups. Okay, so that's what the doctor's opinion. And the U's are what the data is telling us. We have these kind of bias groups in the data. So ideally, we want the bias groups to form under the doctors given some kind of a guideline breaking of the groups of the patients. But in the case like this, if some data belongs to two different C groups that from the doctor's opinion, then we want to penalize cases like that. So we achieve this by counting all the instances that cross the top level of groups like this. So we penalize instances that in this U cluster. So by doing this, and then these two clustering algorithms are going to feed each other signals, okay? And until they settle in an equilibrium, and then we will achieve a solution that both honor the doctor's opinion and also honor the bias opinion from the data itself. So we applied our algorithm to the multiple sclerosis patients' data. And here we have 574 instances, patients. And now this blue result is just a progression, just a prediction applying the regression model without considering any bias feature in the group. And then this red one is if we apply our predictive model based on the hard breakdown of groups given by the doctor. Okay? And this third one is applying our k-means plus the predictive model and let them interact with each other. And so we can see that there's overall 11.4% performance gain from our model compared with without taking care of the bias in the data. And the right side, what we wanted to do is to see this performance gain. Is it really across every subgroup that the doctor gave us? Or it is just due to that one group, maybe we did better, and the other groups we did badly. So we break down the performance into groups, and we can see that this gain is actually consistent across the subgroups of patients that the doctor gave us. Okay? And we also take our model to Parkinson's disease data sets, which is publicly available in the UCI repository. This is a machine learning database. There's lots of available data sets there. And here, the according to doctor's opinion, the breakdown group, there's 4 of them, depending male or female, and the age is greater than 65 or less than 65. And again, we applied k-means on this, and the prediction is also very similar to the MS case. It's predicting 2 of these mobility levels for Parkinson's patients. And our model for the mobile ability, there's a mobile ability and the total ability. And we again had a 28% gain on the overall and a 24% gain on the overall in the total mobility. And again, the gain is consistent across all the 4 groups that when we break down the gain. So we think this result is even more impressive compared with the MS data sets. We think the reason is this data set has almost 6,000 instances, and while our MS case is only like, it's less than 600 instances in that one, okay? So for this model, what we developed is a non-parametric model so that it can simultaneously address the bias in the data and also incorporate experts' opinion on the disease subgroups. So in this case, we actually use the experts' opinion as a hierarchical constraint. That's the top level clusters. The hierarchical constraint to a non-parametric model in the form of data subgroups. So this is applicable to other applications where the clustering can be improved by doctors' opinion, domain knowledge in this. Question? Yes?
So you're just about done with this part of the talk, right?
Pardon?
You're just about done with this part of the talk.
Yes, yes.
Okay, so did doctors help or not help? I wasn't clear. In other words,
The doctor did help. Look, this is without doctors. Nothing. Just on the blue side.
got it. Okay.
Yeah. Oh, this is with doctors hard breakdown with what doctor's opinion. And ours actually improved the doctor's accuracy because we did a fuzzy clustering. We didn't just break down according to what doctor says. We used doctor's opinion and did k-means on this. Okay, so that's what we did. Yes, sir.
For the automatic clustering,
Yes.
don't you need some sort of parameter to set the size of your clusters or something like this?
So
Is there some clustering?
this is learned in the process. So that's why it's called non-parametric. Normally the clustering like a k-means, right, and the EM, like a Gaussian mixture model, you have to say how many clusters are there. But with this non-parametric Dirichlet process, actually the number of clusters is learned in the process. So it's more like the data is telling us how many clusters are there. Yes?
Did you find that the number of clusters was similar to the number of doctors that you knew objectively?
These are 2 things, right? The non-parametric is here.
No, but you said you were using the clusters to account for the bias because different doctors judge differently. That's how we started, right?
That's a 2 type of clustering. This is a disease subgroup. We're talking about the top.
Right.
And the top number cluster is fixed. That's
Right.
given by the doctor.
Right.
But here, nobody knows how many clusters are there.
Right. But you were saying that the reason you need this is because the data is biased because it comes
Yes.
from different people.
Yes.
So did you find the number of people correlated with the number of clusters you found in the data, which would support that?
Okay. I misunderstood the question. Excellent. Yes. So actually, when we did this, what the Dirichlet process does is you can set saying maximum number of cluster goes to 80, and the data may cut it off like 5 or 6. So we have like 20 doctors, I think, in these data sets. And the ending cluster, what we have is actually between 5 to 10. Okay, so what the data actually did, yes?
So your ending clusters, do they split, I guess, patients across doctors? So for example, if I'm looking at U1 and U2 there,
Right.
would I find that there are patients from multiple doctors in both?
So first of all, these are not doctors, right?
No,
These,
I'm looking at the
yeah.
bottom.
Yes, yes.
So in
There-
other words, if there was no, if it wasn't based upon the different doctors.
Right. The reason is because two doctors may actually have similar bias, right? So we are doing the according to the bias in the data. We're not doing the by doctors here.
So in other words, you would say that the bias is there based upon the interaction between the particular patient and the doctor?
We did not explain the type of bias, right? We just try to address
No,
this.
I understand. I'm just trying
Yeah.
to say, based upon the results that you saw, if you could, entertain like where you thought the bias was coming from.
Right. Actually, that's an excellent observation. So what we did is we see the improvement, but we did not analyze the composition of these patients actually from how many doctors. That will be actually an interesting thing to look for. Yeah. Okay. So any more questions? So now let's move on to the second one, which is detecting abnormal cortical regions for epileptic patients. So this is in collaboration with NYU's medical school. So the first one was in collaboration with the Harvard Medical School for in their research group. So this one is for epilepsy. So epilepsy is another neurological disorder. And what happens is it's caused by a malfunctioning of nerve cells in the brain. So people will suffer unprovoked seizures. And this, it affects about 1% of the population, and 1/3 of it is a resistance to medical treatment in this. So for these patients, the only solution to to lead a seizure-free life is for doctors to identify the lesional area on their brain and actually surgically remove that, so that they can be seizure-free. So the whole process of this treatment goes like this. First, the patient is going to have an MRI exam on their brain, and then the doctor is going to trace the lesional areas visually, looking at the MRI image, and then they will insert intracranial EEG on the patients to further confirm this is a lesional area. And then the patient will go under surgery for the removal, for the lesions. And the MRI exam can have two outcomes. One is that the doctor can actually visually detect the lesions. So they know where to put the intracranial EEG to confirm it. And there's another case that the MRI may appear completely normal. The doctors are not able to see anything. Now, it's unfortunate that 45% of the epileptic patients, their MRI fall into this normal range. That means the doctor cannot see anything just by looking at the MRI image. And for these patients, because they cannot accurately insert the intracranial EEG to detect the lesions, and then the chance of being seizure-free after the surgery drops to 29%, compared with 66% if the doctor actually can see something wrong in their MRI image. So this is really a problem for those MRI negative patients. So our goal, working with the doctors from NYU, is to detect the lesional regions in MRI negative patients. So that means when doctors cannot see anything, we think that machine learning algorithm can do by looking at the pixels by pixel, comparing with normal brain images, that can see something that human eyes cannot see. So that is our goal, is to detect the lesional regions in MRI negative patients, and using their brain MRI images. So first of all, we need to model the brain to do that. Yes?
Is that a three-dimensional image or two-dimensional?
The what?
Is the image three-dimensional?
It's a 3D. Yes, it's a 3D MRI. So what happens first is we have to model the brain of human brain. So and here we use a standard technique called surface-based morphometry. So this is, you will cover the human brain, the cortical surface, with little triangles, with over 300,000 triangles. And every vertex is going to be one of your data points for the brain. And for these data points, we're going to collect these 5 features, like what's the curvature, what's the cortical thickness, gray-white matter. So these can be extracted from the 3D MRI image. So we get these features, and so this will be the input to our model. Okay, so for every brain, we model it using this called SBM, surface-based morphometry. And now, once we do that, we're going to generate the training data for our patients, for our model. And this training data comes from 18 patients in NYU's medical school. They went through surgery. They're MRI negative, and they actually went through the surgery, and they were seizure-free. So every patient have a different resection area, right? Because depending on the region and how large the lesion is, so they have a section of their brain removed. So we get these sections of the brain, and so for these 18 patients, these are the sizes of data points we get for each of these patients. So these are the positive patients, the positive data points, and there's over like 163,000 positive data points that we get. And how about the negative examples? When you try to detect something is lesional or non-lesional, right? You need to have a lesional sample and a non-lesional sample. So for the non-lesional sample, we just take 50 healthy people who are not epileptic at all, and then take the exact corresponding section that was cut off for each patient, and then we make them the negative instance. So here are the negative instance, which is, and with all these 50 healthy brains, we get over 8 million negative instances. So this is our training data to our model. So the challenges here is, first of all, there is a limited number of features. We only collected 5 features for every data point. So to solve this, we actually map this to a higher dimensional space using a technique called the restricted Boltzmann machines. So what the restricted Boltzmann machine is actually kind of like a neural network. So with the input, this is your input, our five input that we collected from an MRI image. And we use a layer of hidden nodes to learn a distribution of our input data. So why do we do this? Because we are so this RBM is used in 2 ways. You can either map it to a higher dimensional space, or you can map it to a lower dimensional space, depending. If you have lots of input on this visible layer, and you can use fewer nodes, neurons on the invisible layer, and that will be, you will be doing dimension reduction in that case. But you can also map it to a higher dimensional space to discover more structured features from your input. So in our case, we actually mapped it to a higher dimensional space. So then the second challenge is, like I mentioned earlier, that everybody's brain is different. So from the data points, there's a bias involved. So here, again, we apply the non-parametric mixture to group the data into bias groups. Okay, so this is a similar technique as the first model that I talked about. And lastly, I want to mention is there's a special requirement for this task. It's so-called the imbalance data, and there's a high demand on true negative rate. So what is this? First of all, our positive data and negative data, they don't have the same number of instances, because we took, remember we had like 160 positive instances and over 8 million negative instances, right? So if you train this, your model is going to be biased towards the majority number of instances. Okay, going to predict everything is negative. So a typical technique to do this is to try to do an ensemble. Okay, so produce 50 models, let's say, everyone has the same number of positive and negative instances. That means you take the positive instance and match it with 1/5 of the, 1 out of the 50 of the negative instance and produce a model, and you do this, and you produce 50 model of them. But this problem is also very specific, particular in the sense that we want to detect the lesion in this resected area. That's our task. But we don't want to mess up those benign region outside the resected area. Like in this example, we have a very good detection here. The red ones means it's a lesional. So we have a very good detection here, but we also have lots of false alarms outside this region. And this is really not acceptable, although the true negative rate means the correctness of our prediction is already pretty high, 98% outside this region. But this is really not acceptable, thinking about the doctor cannot insert intracranial EEGs at all these red areas to tell if it's truly lesional or not, right? So this is not, so we want some detection like this. We have a good detection here, but the rest is really clean. So this actually have a true negative rate of 99.6 in this case. So we have a very high requirement of this for this particular problem. So to do this, what we did is when we do the ensemble, we throw away all the bags. That means among those 50 models we built, we throw away those bags whose true negative rate is going to fall below certain things. So we call this a selective bagging of those bags that we produced. Okay? So to put all these together, this is the flow of our algorithm. We have 5 inputs from our MRI image. And when we use a Boltzmann machine to map it to a higher dimensional space. And after that, we use this non-parametric grouping to get the bias groups. So we got those groups, and then we build our predictive model using those bias groups. And then we get 50 of them. And once we get 50 it's not. So these are the bias groups. And then after that, for each group, we're going to apply the selective bagging. For that, we build 50 bags on each one, and then we apply the ensemble on the selected bags. So here's the result of our model. So we compare our result with and without treating the bias. So with the non-parametric grouping, we'll be treating the bias. Without it, here the RBM alone will be without taking into account of the bias of the brain. And this linear regression model is something, this is a logistic regression model, is a model that's currently in production at NYU. And at the time of the research, okay? So we compare these 3 models, and we look at the 2 threshold when we do the selective bagging. So this one, we throw away all the bags with accuracy is less than 90% in the bagging, and this throw away all the bags that's the accuracy in the benign region is less than 95%. And then these are the 3 models we are comparing. So we look at, in the threshold 95, our model achieved a 58 detection rate on the lesional region, and it has a 99.9% clean detection on the benign region outside resectional area. And while the ones that in production has 50% detection and a 99.1% detecting rate on the benign region. And so for the threshold 90, ours is, I'm sorry. So for the 90% detection rate, the threshold, our model has 58% detection rate and a little bit worse, but still very good accuracy on the benign region, which is 99.6. And the one in production the logistic regression is doing similar detection rate, but this performance on the benign region is not acceptable. It's 97.4. That's too low. We also compared this RBM alone is if we don't treat the bias in the data. So we will see that the true negative rate, which is accuracy on the benign region, is low. It's 98.1. And also the detection rate is 75 and 50, so they are not stable in a sense. When we go through the threshold, change the threshold value. And our model has a stable detection rate and a consistent, very high accuracy in the benign region of the data, of the brain. And you may think that 58% is very low as a performance for a machine learning algorithm. But keep in mind that these are the patients that the doctor is not able to see anything, the experts. They are negative, MRI negative. And if we can help them to identify 60% of the patients, and that is already a very happy result for them to be able to treat those patients right before. So here is one of the results if we worked on one brain. So this is like an image from the 3 sides of the brain. So this is the resection area, and the yellow ones are the detected region. We do have some false alarms outside, but not that many, okay, like a few of them. So they are happy with this kind of results. Yes?
So if you go back to the previous slide, so there's a trade-off between the detection rate and the true negative rate. I guess
there should be, yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you looked at, I guess one of the things you could look at determining what is the optimal threshold to select
Right.
for the selective value?
Yes.
Looking at that?
We could do that, yes. But for our experiment, we just did the 90 and 95. Yes. Yes. We could look at more threshold to do that.
That's one question. The second question is that I understand that it's not, stable, the fact that you're getting in one case 75% detection,
Right.
okay, versus 50s everywhere else.
Right.
But when I see that, I get a little bit skeptical of the fact that maybe you can really do a lot better and get closer to that 75% because in other words, you're able to achieve a 95% detection rate and you're lowering your true negative rate by.
And then this side probably will go unacceptable in a sense.
No, I understand that. You're right, but 98.1% is clearly a lot worse than 99.
Right.
I mean, is there a cutoff that you have? Is it 99.5%? Is it 99%?
Remember in this previous image that we had 98.3 is not acceptable in this case. So usually this has to go close to 99% for them to be happy about.
When you're looking at, now I'm having a question. You're saying true negative rate being, I agree looking at that picture it's not acceptable, but I mean, so I guess your false negative rate is 1.7%, right?
Right,
okay.
1.7,
So there
yes.
it's 0.4%. But what's stopping the 0.4% to being distributed outside of that region, which is healthy, in the healthy region?
I mean, this 4.4 is measuring this healthy region, right? So this is caused by these red dots.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Could not see them.
Yeah. So this is the correctness of the benign region, right?
Okay.
So this is just because of the little errors.
And the sample size or the number of, I guess.
Yeah, this is huge. That's why it's 0.4 already, causing that.
But the population size, is it the same in both pictures? Because the different brains you were looking at, there were different parts cut out.
This is the same. This is the same brain.
Same brain.
Yes. This is just different algorithms. Yes. Yes.
Did you consider weighting the experts differently, in like a different way, instead of putting it into its own more basic model and maybe having its own network just for the experts?
Sorry, I didn't get it. Can you
Did you
repeat?
consider maybe like for the experts using a network model, how you're weighting the experts? Maybe because there might be more bias in the experts themselves. So maybe like we said about the whole, there's different biases. It's going to be different. So maybe have its own network and maybe map not just the model that solved in previous stages, but the experts individually. Individually mapping the experts to a higher dimension.
Oh, okay. So what we are mapping here is not from the experts, we're from the MRI image input,
Or
right?
I'm saying, would you consider maybe mapping the experts to get any more bias out of the experts themselves, to get more accuracy in terms of how you're reading the experts when you're in top?
Okay, so I think in this particular case, we're looking at the MRI images, right? The 3D MRI images. So there's really not, we're not looking at the experts' opinion here. Experts are not able to see anything. They see this image as absolutely normal, okay? So that is the problem here.
When I say experts, also you could, even if you're not using real people, the experts themselves with the different models, so instead of bagging.
Oh, I see.
Instead of bagging, maybe you have your models as different inputs too.
I see. So what you're saying is we can build different models and then do this. Yes, that could be another approach. We could look at it, yes. Definitely, using a different model, that's another way to do ensemble learning, yes. Yeah. Question?
So how do you deal with the fact that you don't really have enough data? Like you have 18 people, like you can't tell the difference between the 90% and 95% threshold. Obviously there is some sacrificed accuracy, but I checked, it rates every single person the same in that chart. And
Okay, so here,
yeah, I know, I understand how you make the model. My question is, like, what if the doctor's made a mistake on one patient? Then your whole model will be very, very messed up.
these 18 patients they went through surgery and they're seizure free.
I see.
So these are and there are not that many of them, so that's why there's only 18 patients. But don't misunderstand that our training data has 18 points, because every patient contributes lots of training data points, yes. Any more questions on this? Yes?
This is a political question. What did NYU, what did they say when you get these results? Did they say, oops, we're going to change our procedures?
Oh, when I was leaving this, they were evaluating to replacing the logistic regression model with this, because this definitely does better than that. I actually am not sure what's the status of this now, if they actually have replaced or not. So the comparison I did this with what the logistic regression, that has been in production in NYU since 2012, that the RR model, yes.
They were willing to look at the data. They understood what you were doing, and they were able to say.
Oh yeah, they are happy that we actually can detect 58% because they are not seeing anything, right, from the MRI. So that would be, remember the seizure-free rate, if you can actually see something, is 69%. Without it, it's only 29%. So there's a big difference, yeah. So this, so this seems low, but because it's significant because it's the patient that the expert cannot see anything wrong with them. And so this is, our model is compared with the performance with logistic regression, which was in production, and also a standard model without addressing the bias. Ours did better than that, okay? So, okay, great. So let's, so looks like we have time to go to the third one. The third one is probably interesting. So we are trying to predict the potential performance by looking at a pool of candidates, right? So here, the motivation is because the enrollment for graduate program has been continuously increasing. So for the admission officers, the job is becoming more and more tedious just to read those applications and going through that. And we try to predict student success based only on quantitative measures. So that is another motivation, is we didn't take in the soft measures like recommendation letters like that, because there could be cheating going on with the recommendation letter sometimes. So we want to see if we can build a model with hard measures, only like GRE scores or GPAs from the previous schools, like that. And if it's that successful, we can try to help the admission officer to focus on small amount of applications to read instead of the entire pool. So this is, so we take, the data is using students that has been admitted in the past in the program, that they already finished their studies. And we use quantitative features from their original application to the program. And So this is MS students from the Master in CS program from Northeastern University. And then we aim to identify the top 20% and bottom 20% of the students in the program. Okay? So the reason is it's not like the first half and the bottom half is because the middle students are really hard to tell, right in the middle. So we try to identify the top ones and the bottom ones. So this is the data we have. So this is the total number of students enrolled in each year. And you can see they've been consistently growing. And so here are the applications they received each year. And you can see they're also growing really fast. So we try to, this data that the students admitted is really small. So to make our model better, we try to leverage on those applicants that either we rejected or we accepted but they didn't attend. So we try to expand our data set to make use of these data. So this is one of the challenges that we actually addressed. So these are the 12 features we used to make the prediction. Yes, question?
Just back a slide.
Yeah.
How is it that the top 20% is 51 students and the bottom 20% is 42 in the last row? Shouldn't it be the same amount of students or close to the same?
Oh, no, so it's not by the number of students. It's what we're really taking is the GPA. So we cut off by the GPA. So if you say the GPA is from 3.3 to 4.0, right? So you're looking at this range, what will be the top 20%, what will be the bottom 20% of the GPA of the students. And then there is some discrepancies there, cut off. Okay. So these are the features we used, the GRE score, because there are lots of foreign students, so there's also TOEFL scores coming in. And somehow the admission officer told us the maximum number of lines the student have written before, it matters, so we included this feature. And our result actually shows this feature is pretty much useless. So maybe because you can easily double the line of your code, you know that, right? And also, it's all really what the student says. I coded 10,000 lines, or some students say I coded 1,000 lines. So it turns out this feature actually did not mean much. And so there's also the degrees in which is in CS or it's not in CS, so under the school ranking, so these are the hard measure features that we used to make the prediction. So what we need to address here, the subjectivity is from year to year, the admission officers are different. They put different emphases. And, but this time, we know exactly the grouping, the bias group. We know this is student from this year, then student from that year. It's not like in the previous case, we don't know the bias group. So we use some non-parametric grouping from the data. So here, we actually know the grouping of the data. So here, we used a paradigm introduced by Wapnick. It's called learning using privileged information. So that can address this kind of issue. I don't think I'm going to go through the technical details of the SVM here. Okay, so basically it just adjusting. This is a standard support vector machines, and to address this bias group, you're going to change the constraints and to incorporate that. So I think if you're interested, we can discuss that offline. So we have something to address the subjectivity of the admission officers. That's the point. And the second we want to address is the training data is very little. So we want to make use of those unlabeled data. That means those people we rejected or those people who admitted and didn't come, who declined the offer. So these people don't have their GPA measured in the program, but we still want to use them. So this is another technique called the semi-supervised learning in SVM, which can incorporate both labeled data and unlabeled data. So so we address this with these two. We compare, and our model is actually, again, this is the technical detail of this semi-supervised SVM, which can use both labeled data and unlabeled data. So I'm not going to go through these slides. So our model put these two together. So we can both address the bias in the bias group from year to year, and also make use of the unlabeled data. That's the students that's that did not get admitted or declined to attend. So we just modify this target function with, these are the new constraints we're going to put in for our model. So then we compared our model with a standard SVM, just without doing anything. And then the SVM only taking into account the unlabeled data. And then the SVM only taking into account the bias group from year to year. Yes?
Could you please explain how the unlabeled data helps in bringing in new information?
Oh, so the unlabeled data in the sense that, say if you have only 2 points, the SVM is going to find a hyperplane right in the middle, right? Now, if there is unlabeled data, you get 10 points in the plane, right? And the SVM is going to try to label this data as either positive or negative, and then find a plane. So these 10 points may shift your plane properly. So your data points, let me see if I have a marker. Thank you. So let's say, extreme case, you only have a positive and negative. That's going to be your SVM, what it tells you. And now if I have some unlabeled data, say I have some here, some here, some here, some here. And then the SVM is saying, this can be either positive or negative. This is positive or negative. So I'm going to try to find a plane. I either mark these positive or negative, and maybe the best plane I'm going to find is going to make all these guys, they are very similar. So I'm going to mark all these negative, and then I'm going to achieve a better solution like that. So this unlabeled data is sort of help you to position this plane differently. So this picture may be not that. So let's see this. There's a positive and there's a negative here. Okay. So it is like this. So suppose I have points, unlabeled data like this, and here are unlabeled data like this. It's probably the plane is going to shift like that for the SVM. Okay. So this unlabeled data, although unlabeled, when you learn the model, SVM may try to label it in such a way that enhance the correctness of those labeled data.
Okay, so that hyperplane will separate the one population from the other. That's what you're looking
Yes,
for.
yes.
But okay, so in principle, I understand that adding a label could actually optimize the solution. But what prevents you from adding a median such points since you don't have the performance of them? Why do you have to restrict yourself to
So it's the optimum assignment of these points, because these points can either be assigned positive or negative. So if the data really lay out like this, then the optimum solution is assign all these negative, assign these all positive, right? So this assignment is these data points going to be labeled positive or negative is done internally by the SVM when they try to learn the model. So by positioning these unlabeled data, potentially you can get a better plane to separate that. Yes?
So let me see if I understand, but there could be instances where incorporating unlabeled data would actually lower your accuracy.
Yes, definitely, yes. But this, since this data is so little here in our case, and we're hoping to leverage on those.
But I mean, just because it's little doesn't mean that the unlabeled data will help. You're getting a lot of noise from the unlabeled.
That's true. We let me see. This is without any. You compare.
Results, but that could be based upon this particular instance, this particular data set. For a different university, this approach might actually reduce the accuracy, right?
There's a possibility, yes. But we did compare for these data sets that with the help, this S3VM, right? That is with the help of unlabeled data, compare with just a naive SVM, which is not considering the unlabeled data. So as you can see that, actually these two, S3VM and SVM Plus, they perform pretty similarly in a sense. And ours is combining both of them, taking into account. And we did better in the testing data. And also, you can see there's a better fit by considering both of these challenges if we address both of them at the same time. So this is a quantitative approach we did, try to predict the academic success of the students. And it's a new variance of SVM. And so this, the goal is to serve as a focus attention for the admission officers, okay? Because of the time, I'm going to skip this. This is just a summary of those three models that what my research is about, is investigating the bias and the subjectivity in the data. And these are the papers that for details for these models that I've talked about. I skipped the first one, which is a transfer learning model. And the first model is this second paper, and this is a third, and the third one is the second model for the epileptic. And this one is not published yet. It's under review, so for the student admission cases. Okay. That's about it.